All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for tuning in, either live right now or the folks will be watching our recording later on after this is posted onto YouTube and on the social media. We appreciate taking the time to listen. And thank you, Judge Schroeder, for taking a few minutes out of your afternoon and out of your birthday afternoon. So happy birthday to you today. Hope you have a good rest of your celebration.
Thank you.
Yeah. So as we continue with kind of our series of learning what different auditor's office partners are doing and how they're coping with the pandemic, but also just how they serve the community, what resources, Judge Schroeder will kind of provide us an update from the legal field and the legal perspective as judge of the Western County Court. So kind of my first question for you is, what is, when folks think of, judges here in Ashtabula County and the court system, many don't know that there's an Eastern Court and a Western Court, and what actually is your jurisdiction? What are some of the cases that you interact with, and where do you hear those cases at?
We have in Ashtabula County basically a two-tier system of courts, and we call my level court the lower courts, and then the common pleas courts are the higher level courts. The major cases, the trials for murders, things of that nature, take place in common pleas court. There's 3 common pleas judges. But the lower courts, the county courts and the municipal courts, hear the other matters, the smaller cases, misdemeanors, plus felonies. Most felonies will start out in the lower courts, and they will have what's called a preliminary hearing, and if there's enough evidence to hold them for court, then they go up to the common pleas court. But as I said, we have 4 lower courts. County courts are a rather unique phenomenon in the justice system. There aren't many counties that have them. They're generally reserved for the rural counties, such as ours, and county court judges are part-time, and that's really quite unique. So Judge Specht, who's the Eastern County Court judge, and I are part-time judges. We basically divide the county down the middle. Anything that occurs in the eastern part of the county goes to his court, the western part of the county comes to my court. So this system has been in place for a number of years. And then you have Ashtabula Municipal Court that hears Ashtabula and Saybrook and Ashtabula Township, and then Conneaut Municipal Court, Judge Irochi, and he hears the cases from Conneaut. So there's actually 4 different lower courts. All 4 of us cooperate and communicate on a regular basis, and we've actually been speaking quite a bit through this process. This has been a very unique time in legal history because we had the rug pulled out from underneath us overnight. All of us had some indication this was coming, but just basically to be closed down to some extent. And I would note that the Constitution in the state of Ohio prohibits closing courts. Mm-hmm. The rights and Constitution in the Ohio Constitution require the courts to be open. And they also require that justice be administered without denial or delay. So it was something that was unique for all of us. And we were fortunate in the Western County Court in 2 different regards. Number one, about a year ago, I began developing a video conference capability with the court's IT department. And I shopped around and looked at a couple different programs because I wanted to do some things remotely. There's some hearings, for example, that are very brief hearings that if I had the remote capability, I can and have done them from home before all this took place. Some of them are just brief hearings to set bond. I do some search warrants in that manner. And I wanted to do it from a remote location, even on vacation. I can take the laptop with me and conduct hearings from out of town, which I've done. And so we had this capability. I've worked quite closely with the court's IT department. And in March of this year, when all this started, the court's IT department sent out an email to the judges indicating, hey, we have this video conference capability in place. Judge Schroeder's been using it for a year. And we were able to quickly and very inexpensively, it's a very inexpensive program, implement this throughout the county. So all the judges are using it now. Some judges are still having some live hearings. All judges are using a system, and it works very, very well. It's something similar to Zoom, but it is more specifically adapted. It's called Whereby In. used to be called a peer-in, but then they changed the name for some reason. But it's more suited to court hearings. Everybody has their own room, so to speak, and an attorney can have a private conference with their client. We can record the entire matter and then save it to a directory, and it works quite well. And then when we basically made the determination several weeks ago that we probably should shut down even more than we had because we were coming into the peak period of this, it occurred to me that the vestibule outside the Western County Court is really a separately secured facility. So we outfitted that with a laptop and we made it basically a virtual courtroom. And you can come by on any Thursday morning, you'll see people standing out, lined up 6 feet apart outside the courthouse, and they go into the vestibule, they'll stand on a line, and we actually conduct their hearing. Thursday morning is when I do arraignments. And yesterday, we heard quite a number of cases and disposed of a number of cases in that manner. If they have an attorney, the attorney can either be in the courtroom or they can even be in their office, and everybody's on the same page just as this format, and we can address and conclude cases. I never stopped hearing cases. We certainly slowed down, but now I'm trying to ramp it back up again because not hearing cases causes a lot of problems down the road. Number one, some people really need to have their case heard. For example, I had a guy a couple of weeks ago, and some people kind of have difficulties in their life and they have problems in a lot of different courts. Maybe they have drug, alcohol issues or whatever. And then they go through a program and they want to clean up their affairs. They want to get their driver's license back. But if there's a warrant out in one court, then they can't get their driver's license back. And he came in and told me, you know, Judge, you're the only judge who's heard my case so that I can begin to clear this stuff up. And the defendants seem to be very, very appreciative of the ability to conclude their cases in this manner. And they're basically, it's just like being in court. And I had a conversation yesterday with an attorney who practices a lot in this county, and we both agreed this crisis is probably going to change how we do business, because this really is a nice, convenient system in a lot of different regards. A lot of times it's not necessarily necessary for everybody to drive to one location, convene in a courtroom for sometimes what is a 5-minute hearing. So I would not be surprised if this system stays in operation. The Supreme Court of Ohio made some money available to assist us with this, and we contacted them and told them what they were doing, and they gave us a grant of $15,000 to buy all new equipment to do this. And that equipment's arrived. And the courts, I spoke with the court's IT department today. They're getting ready to install a laptop in a number of different conference rooms in my court so we can continue to do this through this entire process and into the future. So as I said, we really stopped working.
Well, and you spoke to the importance of hearing cases. So what are some of the cases, what are some of the examples of defendants perhaps, or different hearings that you may have as a Western County Court judge?
Well, we here in my court, we have a lot of DUIs, driving under the influence. And driving under the influence cases can be a very problematic thing for the defendant because he's under what's called he or she's under an administrative license suspension, and they may need driving privileges. And they have to really, in many regards, they have to come to court to begin the process to sort these things out. In effect, they want to accept responsibility for what they did. They want to move the case forward. But if we're shut down or operated on a very limited basis, it was very difficult for them to do that. Well, about a month ago, I really, after we went through the peak period, I made a determination to ramp this thing up so that we can start hearing more and more cases and people can get these things resolved. Most of the lawyers have been very appreciative and understanding and cooperative. They like it because it moves cases off their individual dockets, and it's been a good thing all the way around.
So you had said you had a system of this kind of already in place prior, where you could have a virtual hearing, and is that kind of a big help in terms of, as you said, expediting cases, but then also if someone has, for example, been here at the county jail, instead of transporting them to your facility, could they actually have a hearing here from the jail, and then we wouldn't have to worry about that?
We've had a system like that in place for a while from the county jail. And it was a video system where when someone's arrested, I would arraign them through the county jail. And we also used it through the Geneva City Jail. This system expanded upon that to allow for actual hearings beyond that to take place, for counsel to participate, and for it to be done more remotely. That other system that we had for a number of years, I had to be seated at the bench. We had to wait for them to bring the prisoner down to a video room and do it at that point. But this just gives us much greater flexibility to accomplish these things. The actual origin of this, and I've been working on this for a while, was search warrants. Because in the middle of the night, if they need to do a search warrant, the protocol generally is call the judge at home. So my phone rings and they would say, "Judge, we need a search warrant. Can you sign a search warrant for us, approve a search warrant?" So the old procedure would be that the judge would wait for them to drive to your house. In some instances, this entire process took hours, literally. And I got the idea for doing search warrants this way because I was, before I became a judge, I was a law director in Conneaut. I called to help with a search warrant there. It took an extended time period to get the judge in, to get everything approved. I actually went out with the officers when they conducted the search, and the drug dealer was sitting there with a pocket full of money and no more drugs, because drug dealers take advantage of technology too. They text, they tweet, they do all this nonsense. They have their own code. So people in the community know when they have a supply of drugs in, when they're holding drugs, they'll sell those very quickly. So in that position, I knew we had to expedite that procedure. So I started doing this for search warrants. In some instances, I've been able to get search warrants completed in 20 minutes from when they made to when they're signed in the officer's hands. I sign them, scan them, email them back, and then the officers go out and execute the search warrants. It's a lot easier for them. It's with regard to transporting, one of the other things we did right away was no more transporting prisoners during this time period. So we've ramped up that aspect of it to accommodate the COVID-19 situation. Mm-hmm. But we're going to be utilizing this technology and expanding it in the future. It's been a real plus for the justice system. You know, the justice system moves slowly. We've always done it this way, so we're going to continue to do it this way. But we were forced to do other things. And these other things, I think, are very beneficial and will be very helpful, particularly to a smaller, more cash-strapped county like Ashtabula County, to have this availability. And the other unique thing I've noticed about it, and I've been practicing law for almost 40 years, people will show up and these things will start on time, as opposed to the traditional hearing, well, this attorney can't be here for a half hour. These things start on time and they finish in a timely manner, which is really unique for the justice system. Anybody who's ever had a court case can tell you how long they've sat out in the hall waiting for their case to be called. But the very nature of this, knowing there's people sitting there online waiting for this, things tend to move promptly on time. So that's another advantage to it.
Interesting. So, yeah, nice. And I would like to, any of our folks who are watching either live here on Facebook Live or on Zoom, if you've got questions, feel free to type those into the chat feature, and I can share those with the judge. I just have a few questions left, but feel free to type away any questions that you may have. But Judge, you also oversee part of the probation aspect through your court. So how has that been affected, during this time?
That's really been impacted too. Generally speaking, probation officers will see the clients in the courthouse, but we're not having clients come into the courthouse. The closest they come is into this vestibule area. So probation has not been able to physically see their people. Another aspect of this whole thing that we're going to be living with for a while, the financial impact of this. The Supreme Court's been pretty generous and given us some grants. They gave us one that I mentioned to get the new equipment. We were just approved the other day for another grant for some things. And I think there's a third grant that's imminent as well. So they're helping with these things. But the impact on the budgets, we are almost a self-contained unit. We operate on the basis of collection of fines and costs. And that subsidizes or pays for our operation. Now, we're not a collection agency. That's not why we're there. On the other hand, we depend on court costs and things to pay for the salaries of the probation department. And there's been a dramatic downturn in the collections, which will ultimately have already caused some budget problems. As you know, David, we've already had one round of budget cuts in the county, and we don't have a lot of extra expenditures in the court system. We really don't. I'm just talking several $1,000s of stuff beyond salaries that we have. And we've got to deal with that and come up with other ways. So I had a meeting this morning with Judge Specht in the probation department. We're going to begin looking at other ways of helping them do their job so that they can see their probationers and move life along for them, and also collect the fines and costs that they're required to collect. Restitution is another issue. If somebody damages somebody's property, they pay restitution through the probation department. And if we've been operating on a limited capacity, all of those things are slowed down. But as I said, I'm really making an effort to ramp it up. We're not going to do any trials requiring 20 or 30 people in the room at one time. But candidly, we don't have that many trials. When this thing finally resolves, I've made the attorneys aware that, hey, if we have to, we're just going to have multiple trials in a month to get this cleared up. I don't mind doing that. I did not want to have a docket that was desperately behind, and that was what we were facing. So we've managed to move things. Frankly, with the bars being closed, there aren't quite as many cases coming in.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you too. Yeah, how have cases been? Have you seen a spike in any type of certain crimes that are occurring, or any certain types of issues, or has it been fairly quiet?
Not surprisingly, domestic violence cases have ticked up. In other words, there have been more domestic violence cases and some fairly bad ones. Drunk driving cases have decreased because the bars are closed, so people aren't out doing it. We're still getting some, but not like we were before. I think that the officers are being judicious with respect to writing traffic citations for relatively minor things. If you commit a major offense, you're coming to court. And if you commit a major offense, you belong in jail to protect the public, you're going to jail. I don't want people to think that we're giving free passes, because we're not. But when all this started, we did make an effort to reduce the jail population just in case there would be an outbreak there. But I send people to jail every week who need to go to jail. And we don't want to send the wrong message out to the community. And I'm also going to say that I think the community deserves credit too, because it really has been quite quiet. There has not been a major outbreak of criminal activity. Most people have been very respectful. Most people have been understanding of the difficulty of the time. And, you're always going to have a few, but we always have jail for those people when there need be.
Yeah.
But the general public has been very cooperative.
And our last question, unless someone else texts in a question, regarding, so for common pleas, so you're a Western County Court, and then for the common pleas, the next level, who hear some of the jury trials and some of the bigger cases, are they using this technology? And how would this technology be used for some of the larger cases where you would typically have quite a number of witnesses or people who are watching or jury folks?
They're not having major trials in Ashtabula because the logistics. Number one, you have to bring in, when you pick a jury, you have to bring in 30 to 35 people into the courtroom for the jury selection process. So there haven't been any major trials. I think there have been some smaller ones. All the courtrooms are using this technology to some extent. Judge Harris, I know, is still having people come in to his court live with adequate safety. And I must stress that we go through great lengths to ensure the safety of all the participants. This room that we have, this virtual courtroom, we wipe it down regularly. There's no contact with the individuals of the employees of the courthouse. We do everything. I'm fond of saying my courtroom is safer than the gas station across the street from the courthouse. I go over there and get things, and people are just milling around having contact. But this courthouse and this courtroom are much safer than that, and the grocery store, I might add. So we are essential. We, by Constitution, cannot close. So I made a determination not just to stay open, but to accomplish as much as we can in a safe manner. Mm-hmm. So I think it's worked out pretty well.
Very nice. So we'll be excited to see kind of what this technology brings, like you said, for the future of the legal field. We've made many changes in our office to implement more technology, and I know the courts have too. So it'll be something pretty nice to see, for all folks who are involved.
I think there's a lot of changes that are coming. This technology like this, why do we need to drive to Columbus for seminars any longer? A one-day seminar, you can sit at your desk and do it, as opposed to all of the time and expense and driving. Now, sometimes you want to for one reason or the other, but most of the time you can do these things remotely like this and get just as much information out of it as you would if you were sitting there. So things are going to change in that regard, many for the better.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you again so much for taking the time to talk and to share. Like I said, this video will be shared on our YouTube channel and up on social media on our auditor website as well. We're going to be speaking with Deborah Woodworth of the Ashtabula County Board of Realtors on Monday at 3 o'clock about their profession and how they're meeting the needs of folks here in the county with real estate. But if folks, Judge Schroeder, want to reach out and ask questions to the courthouse, how would they get in touch with Western County Court?
They can call. And I would encourage people, it's actually kind of an interesting process to watch. Come over on Thursday mornings at 9 o'clock when we do the initial appearances. Eastern County Court has been using my courthouse. Judge Speck sits in Jefferson and hears his cases through my courtroom. It's actually kind of an interesting experience. Any Thursday morning is an interesting time to come to court. They are public proceedings, so anybody is permitted to come. The current circumstances, we would make accommodations so that you could watch what's taking place. But I encourage anybody to come to court. It's a very dynamic atmosphere, and it's good for the community. The more people know what we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much. Enjoy the rest of your birthday.
Okay, and, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We'll be seeing you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, dear.